Thank you all so much for coming and welcome. This is our first professional development workshop. In case I haven't met you personally yet, I'm Stacy Penaranda. I'm the Sussex County Coordinator with Read Aloud. Without further ado, let me introduce our first presenter of the day. She's going to be talking to us about the latest and greatest children's books. Jennifer Noonan has spent the better part of the last 15 years working in service of children and families. She's currently the children's librarian at the Lewis Public Library, and she oversees their collection, the programming, and the community outreach there. She has read a lot of children's books, as you can imagine. She has about, I think she told me, 3 to 6 story times every week at the Lewis Library. And she takes special pleasure in finding great reads for people. So we're really anxious to hear what she has to tell us about the latest and greatest children's book. So please welcome our first volunteer expert of the day, Jennifer Noonan.
Thank you, Stacy. I am really pleased to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I want to say thank you to all of you for volunteering to read to children. It's such an important thing, and I feel like, you know, in this area, in Sussex County, we're very fortunate to have a lot of people who have come from other places, from Philadelphia and Baltimore and Washington, D.C., and, you know, had, you know, wonderful and robust careers there and still want to give their time and their energy to something when they get here. So what you're doing is really important. I mean, impacting one kid's life can really, in a what seems like a small way, and helping them get onto that road to literacy really can make a difference in changing their life and, you know, their families' lives, you know. So I just really want to thank you all for giving your time to that and for coming today to see if you can learn something new about what you're doing. So I'm going to talk to you about the latest and greatest picture books. In my opinion, there are so many out there, and as you know, a lot of it is up to personal preference. But I do see a lot of kids every week. I do read to a lot of kids every week, and I do have a feeling for what I think lands on them. Of course, you know, what I do is a little different than what you're doing. I sit and I read, you know, to 20 to 50 kids at a time, whereas you're sitting next to someone, and you really have an opportunity there. You can choose a lot more books will work in that setting than will, you know, work in the read aloud setting in a story time. So yes, I am the children's librarian at Lewis. I got my master's in libraries and information science in 2012 from Syracuse University, and prior to that, I worked for Nickelodeon Kids and Family, where I curated the content, the video content for their website, made sure everything that was on TV got onto the website, and it was interesting how that information and that curation, those curation skills really did transfer well to children's librarianship. So I'm happy to be with you here today. So really, why is book choice so important, right? I mean, it's first we want to say that, you know, great stories, they inspire engagement. If a kid is interested in a story, if the illustrations are great, if it's something that they connect to, that's going to make them want to engage in conversation and want to come back for more. I loved that experience of sitting and reading that book. It really took my imagination somewhere, and I could go someplace different. I could see something different. I could be transported. That is what we're doing, is trying to inspire a love of reading. It also, sitting with a child and sharing a book is a great way to build relationships. And yesterday I spoke to AAUW. I don't know if anybody else was there, but I did know that there were some Read Aloud volunteers there. We talked about it a little bit, but at the Lewis Library, we have become the sponsor of the Imagination Library, which essentially, in a nutshell, sends a free book to kids between the ages of 0 and 5 into their mailbox every month. And, you know, one of the things is, yes, we want for kids to have books in their home. It's you know, conceived and run by Dolly Parton and her foundation. But really, beyond just getting kids exposed to books and having them there in their home, it's creating that relationship within their family of love around books, inspiring conversation around books that can not only impact literacy, but really can impact relationships. So you really do have an opportunity when you're sitting next to a child reading a book to get to know them a little better, to share with them something that you might have learned that may really impact something that they've been thinking about. It's a great opportunity to share relationships or build relationships when you're sitting reading a book. And a great book, something that kids can connect to, is what will inspire that relationship. So book choice is super duper important in my opinion. It also makes it really a lot easier for you as a volunteer when you have a kid that wants to pay attention rather than one that gets bored and is ready to move on to something else or wants to just get up and run around. So I actually this Imagination Library is a wonderful resource for me, and so they curate the books for that program. And so I looked at what they talk about. They curate their books for each age. A 1-year-old gets a different book than a 4-year-old because they're in a different place in their brain development, a different place on their path to literacy. And so they're really careful about choosing the kind of books that they send out. And I went and looked at what they're looking at as far as where 3 and 4-year-olds are in development and the kind of things that they're looking for in books that they send to this age, because that's pretty much who you're working with, 3 and 4-year-olds for the most part. Yeah, give or take a little.
2-year-olds as well.
Some 2-year-olds as well. So some of this bleeds over. So what are they ready to be able to absorb? Stories that have values, stories that talk about character, things like friendship and persistence, things that involve issues that they're dealing with, emotional issues like fear or conflict, fighting with a sibling, being afraid of the dark, things that relate to love and safety, the relationships that they have with the grown-ups in their lives. Of course, the all popular colors, numbers, and letters. These are the building blocks for learning to read. Nursery rhymes, also stories of heroes. I mean, the hero's journey is, something that, transcends the interest of all age groups, and they're interested in the hero's journey as well. They are ready at this age to sort of think about and understand, complicated problems, like I lost the dog that I was supposed to be walking. What do I do now? And how those conflicts might be resolved. They also are big on diversity, and I would say that this is something that librarians and the publishing industry in general is really taking its eye closely to. It's really important for everybody to be able to see themselves in a book, and for people to see somebody that's completely different from themselves in a book, to learn about someone or a life or a culture that they've never seen before. And also just, the idea and the encouragement that it's okay to be who you are, whoever that is. Everybody needs to feel, especially at this young age, to have a sense that who they are is okay for who they are. And, so books that speak to this are also really good for this age group. And of course, everybody wants to laugh, right? Everybody wants to see something funny or something that's gonna, entertain them. So those books are great for this age as well. So I thought that I would center my talk about like the latest books that I've seen that I really love that speak to kids of this age by, sort of centering on these categories. So most of the, I think all of the books that we're going to talk about today have been published either in 2018 or 2019. So you may not have seen them yet. I love the classics too, and those are wonderful, but there's always a lot of great new books coming out, and I would love to invite you. I do see a lot of Read Aloud volunteers at the library, and it's one of my favorite things to do, just to walk around and see what's on the shelf and be able to pull things for people that I think they might like and might enjoy. So please feel free to stop by the library and ask me to see what I think's on the shelf that might be good for you to read this week or this month. So in this idea of friendship and persistence and fortitude, these are some of my favorites that have just come out. Actually, Beth Ferry's book, The Scarecrow, I don't, so many of these books I don't have with me because they were checked out already, but it is a beautiful book. I just got it on the shelf, and it's a wonderful autumn story, and it's about a scarecrow that finds a wounded bird, and instead of scaring it, takes it into its breast to heal, and then that bird ends up coming back and building a nest in the scarecrow. It's just so sweet. I'm getting like goosebumps already. This is illustrated by the Fan Brothers, who is another favorite. They're another favorite of mine. Ocean Meets Sky is another one of their great ones. They have beautiful illustrations that are very whimsical, and their books are lovely. I also recommend the Fan Brothers, not only as illustrators, but they have their own books as well. Steve Antony's books about Mr. Panda are fun. They're just fun. Mr. Panda has several. I'll wait, Mr. Panda. Thank you, Mr. Panda. Good night, Mr. Panda. It's really books about manners, but they are very brief in words. There's always like kind of a funny punchline at the end. The characters are sort of quirky, and kids love these books. So we have, I think, all of them. But the Mr. Panda books, I think, are wonderful for this age, especially when you're talking about manners. The Digger and the Flower. There's no end to the desire for books about construction vehicles. And this is one that's got such heart. It's, about a backhoe that, discovers a flower on the construction site and doesn't want it to get run over. So, tries to protect it. Things go terribly wrong, of course, and he ends up very sad, but he takes the seeds out to the country, and then, more flowers bloom later. It's lovely. Samson in the Snow is a wonderful book about friendship and resilience. A mammoth is sort of looking for a friend, and a wounded bird that gets caught in the snow, and he end up coming together. It's a lovely, sort of one of those quiet books. It's not a great book for me to read at story time. There's too many words, and it's a little sort of quiet, which is lovely to sit next to a child and read. Lisa Job's Can I Keep It? That's brand new and out, and it's really, hey, everybody has a place in the world, but it might not be in your house. We're not gonna take the toad and keep it in a jar in our room, but again, brief sentences, gets the message across, wonderful illustrations, and I think, it's one of those books where you can ask the question, well, where does the bird belong? And, that can entice a conversation between you and the child that you're reading with. Anything that you can involve or share conversation, that solicits conversation, is wonderful, because, kids need to be able to talk in order to get towards their path to literacy. It's not just about reading and learning your letters, but, all of that, having conversation, coming up with the words, coming up with the ideas, is making those neurons knit together to get them where they need to be so that they are ready to learn to read. So conversation is great. Can cat and bird be friends? I don't know. Can they? Seems like a crazy idea. But, it's okay. People who are different and have different ideas can still be friends. Even a cat and a bird, when you think that might be incredibly unlikely. So these are just some of my favorites that have come out in the last couple of months and in the last year. There are lots more. And there were times that I wondered, well, where should I put this book? There's so many categories it could fit into. So issues of fear, conflict, love, safety. There's a lot of wonderful books on this topic. Todd Parr's books, his latest, I don't think that the Don't Worry book is, I think, his latest one that's out. I have another one of his in this presentation. But Todd Parr's books are really wonderful at bringing these ideas of worry, of it's okay to be different, down to a very age-appropriate level for this group. So if you ever and he's got a bunch of them, if you ever feel like you have a child that needs some encouragement in that realm, I say go to Todd's books. They are really wonderful. The Rabbit Listened is kind of a new and award winner. This is also a very quiet book and really can speak to children who have endured trauma. It's a sort of book that goes through these stages of like, well, I didn't want to talk about it, and I was mad about it, and I couldn't, express myself, and, all of these sort of stages in dealing with a traumatic event. But the rabbit listened, didn't try to change anything, didn't try to fix anything. It just listened. And so it's a lovely, lovely read as well. I Really Want to See You, Grandma is just a really fun sort of mishap of circumstance story where grandma and her granddaughter really want to see each other, and they end up at each other's houses at the same time, and then going back and forth. Tara Gomez books, it's silly, it's funny, but it's, that, we have this relationship and love for each other, and I really want to see you. And Tara Gomez books in particular, I really like. He's got a wonderful one on numbers. It's called I Know Numbers. That's a great one for numbers, and a kind of a silly crocodile and dentist book. And he, I love it whenever he has a book that comes out. Dragon Knight is a delightful story. It's a longer one, so it's not a great one for story time, but it's got beautiful illustrations and about a boy who is afraid of the night and a dragon who is afraid of the night, but they're not the same night. The boy is afraid of the dark, and the dragon is afraid of the guy with the sword, and how they're able to come together as friends to overcome their fears. It's delightful. Jabari Jumps, I say that for last because it's like probably top 3 picture books of all time. I love, and I keep like nominating it for awards and all this kind of thing, and nobody listens to me. It's just the best book ever. It's this overcoming a fear. He wants to go off the high dive, and everybody's had to face a big fear. And it's just delightful the way his dad supports him and encourages him in this, and how he overcomes this fear. So I cannot recommend Jabari Jumps enough. It's never on our shelf because I recommend it all the time. But it's also, when we get to the point about diversity, just one of those books, diversity is important, and it's important for kids to be able to see themselves in a book. Books with diverse characters are important, but they don't all have to be about issues that involve race. Sometimes we need to have, books with pictures of kids in color just doing what everybody does, brushing their teeth or trying to jump off the high dive board. And that's, one of the things I just love about this book as well. It's just, everybody can relate to this kid. All right, heroes. Heroes, everybody loves a hero, and popular characters. Bear Came Along is a new one that just came out, and it's, sort of an adventure story, not just about Bear, but about the animals that join him on a ride down a river on a log, and how they handle all of that together. The Bad Seed by Jory John. His books, I am really hot on his books. They're great. He's got sort of a series in this realm. The Bad Seed is a seed who, was bad, misbehaved, all this kind of thing, but was able to grow away from that and know that, sometimes I still make mistakes, but really I'm okay. These books that he's got, The Bad Seed is the first one. The second one is called The Good Egg, which is, an egg that's just always trying to be the peacemaker, and how that sometimes is problematic. And his newest one is coming out called The Cool Bean. So I'll be getting that on the shelf. But kids enjoy these books. There's, a deeper message to it, but they're fun. The illustrations are great. And, I really like to share those books as well. And, heroes are not always perfect, right? Sometimes, everybody has a hero inside of them, even if they feel like they might have some troubles, right? The wall in the middle of this book, this is, like a complication, or misunderstanding. It's, the whole book is sort of bifurcated with the wall in the middle, and, there's a young boy on one side and an ogre on the other, and he's thinking that it's not safe to go to the side with the ogre, but in actuality, the water is starting to rise on this side, and it really might be safer to be over there instead. It's a nice story that gives you the sense that, you know what, things are not always the way they seem. You can look below the surface and see what's going on. Edna and the very Tyrannosaurus Rex versus Edna, the very first chicken, is a delightful story, you know, David and Goliath type of story, where the chicken turns out to be the hero, and it's funny, and it's a great story that I recommend. Linus, the little yellow pencil, he and the eraser have to come together and decide, you know, how they're going to be able to work together in order to accomplish their goals. That's brand new. That's out from Scott Magoon. And Jan Brett, who is a favorite with classics like The Mitten and The Hat. Hedgie's latest book is The Snowy Nap. It actually came out maybe December or January of last year, and it's lovely. P.S. Jan Brett is going to be at the Lewis Public Library with her newest book, The Tale of the Tiger Slippers, on December 1st. It's a Sunday. It's at 10 o'clock. If you want to meet Jan Brett and listen to her talk and get a book signed, buy her new book and get it signed, come on out. That's the Sunday after Thanksgiving. Awkward, little awkward, but we are super lucky to have gotten her to choose us to be a part of her promotional tour. So definitely check that out. Should be great. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about wordless books. When I first started as a children's librarian, this category of books, as well as graphic novels, were really hard for me to get a handle on. I just, I grew up in the 70s, and, everything was very linear, and, I learned with just text, how to read. But really, there's so much decoding and storytelling that can be done in pictures. Graphic novels is a whole other conversation to be had at another event, but the wordless picture books can be extremely valuable in a setting like this. Because it will really solicit conversation. And this is the opportunity where a child can not make up the story, but interpret the story in their own words. And so I would really encourage you to pick up a few of these to share with some children, because there's no right way or wrong way really to look at it. When you open up a wordless picture book, of course there is a story being told in pictures, but you can do it any way you want. If you want to just take a picture walk and look at the illustrations and make comments about what you see, this is all extremely valuable. Sharing a book is more than just reading a book, which Margaret, I'm sure, is going to talk about, and techniques for that. But this is an opportunity for the child to tell the story in their own way, and that could be extremely valuable. Somebody yesterday, when I was at AAUW, mentioned, a lot of the children we work with at Read Aloud, they don't have a parent who has a lot of time to maybe spend reading a book. So this is an opportunity for you to teach them how to enjoy a book, even if they can't read yet. Hey, let's do this together. And if you've got a book at home, who cares if it's got words in it? Why don't you look at the pictures and tell the story the way we're telling this story? And they can still be involved and enjoy and read a story without being able to read the words, even if no one is there to sit and read next to them. So I think that wordless picture books can be extremely valuable, especially for the sort of really literacy-rich conversations that they bring with them. Bill Thompson is one of my favorites. This book, Chalk, is amazing. And I only, sort of learned about it because my second grader brought it home from school. They were doing a project with wordless books. His illustrations are like knockout. And this is a great story of, kids who find some chalk on the playground and everything they draw comes to life. And one of those things is the, dinosaur. Anyway, how they deal with all of that. I Walk with Vanessa is new. And a story about bullying and sticking up for the underdog, sticking up for someone who's being mistreated, and that's it's got no words in it, and it's a wonderful opportunity to have conversation around that topic. Wolf in the Snow is an award winner, won the Caldecott last year, and by Matthew Cordell. a lovely story about a man and a wolf, and how they're able to help each other. The Girl and the Bicycle, and there's another companion one to this by the same author, by Mark Pett, that's called The Boy and the Airplane. And, it's about a girl who sees a bicycle in the window and how she'll be able to get it. Again, it's wonderful. It was very intimidating, I felt, to pick up a wordless picture book and try to share it with a kid. But with a little practice and a little encouragement, it really can be quite fun. So I think it could be a really valuable tool in your toolbox to help share with these kids and help them to enjoy books, even if they can't read yet. Diversity. So in the past, there has not been a lot of diversity, not a lot of diverse characters in children's literature, but that is starting to change. And we are getting a lot of, great titles. In the library world, we talk about having mirrors and windows in our collection. Everybody should be able to see themselves in a book, to be able to see their life reflected, see themselves reflected, be able to relate to a character, right? This is what's going to help us connect to books. This is how children and adults connect to books. So, a book that reflects someone's experience or just the way they look on the outside is a mirror book for them. And then we also need books that are windows, that are books that maybe are looking into an experience that you've never even heard of or never even thought about, whether that's like a home life or a culture or just, a sense of being. Those are window books for children. And so it's important for us to have a broad range of books in our collection so that we have all of those mirrors and windows so people can see themselves and then can also see someone else who is completely different. And that can only help them to kind of understand and have compassion for their fellow human beings. So some of my favorites that have come out lately are Thunderboy Jr. is about a Native American child and, his grappling with the name he's been given. And it's a delightful story. There aren't a lot of picture books that center on Native American children, and it's a really nice one. Alma and how she got her name is also a name story, but based on the Hispanic culture and this little girl, Alma. Teddy's Favorite Toy is a story about a boy who likes to play with dolls and what happens when his favorite doll ends up accidentally in the garbage truck. And, just affirming that, it's okay to play with what you want, to be who you are. This is a good story for that. Naya's Long Walk is a really nice window book into, children who live in other places in the world where they don't get to go to school. What they do is carry water back and forth all day. And what happens when one of them gets sick. That one just came out. I just got it on the shelf. Rocket Says Look Up is, a great story about an African-American girl who wants to go into space. And yeah, it doesn't matter what you look like or who you are or where you came from. The sky is the limit. There may be limitations. And of course, we all know that, no, you can't be anything you want in reality as an adult. But let's not, crush the souls of small children by giving them, the impression that may actually be the case. You never know. You just never know how a kid may end up finding something that they love and ending up on a path that nobody expected, right? Julian as a Mermaid is a wonderful relationship story between a kid and his grandma. He wants to dress up, but he wants to dress up in her clothes. And it's not, my favorite books that, involve issues of identity are just kids being kids. We don't necessarily need to beat anybody over the head with the ideas, and it's just, a kid being a kid, dressing up the way he wants to dress up, and his grandma, finding the things that will make him turn into the person he wants to be today while he's playing. It's a lovely story of acceptance and, accepting who you are for who you are. A Big Mooncake for Little Star is by Grace Lin, who's one of my favorites. She is an Asian author and often has, ideas with the Asian culture woven into her books. One of my favorites of hers is much older. I think it's a 2011. Is Lissy's Friends, which is about a new girl who goes to school and in a new place doesn't have any friends, but through origami is able to eventually find her way to some new friendships. And A Big Mooncake for a Little Star is just a story about how the moon gets its phases, and this girl who nibbles a little bit at the moon every night until it's so small and then disappears. It's delightful. So, of course, everybody wants to just laugh and have fun with books. These are some of my favorite funny books, like We Don't Eat Our Classmates by Ryan T. Higgins. Hilarious. I've been reading that all September. He has these wonderful books, these Bruce books, which I have one of them sitting over there. Bruce is a bear who a nest of geese hatched and imprinted on him and think that he's their mother. And so that the first book is called Mother Bruce, and this was a terrible situation for Bruce. He was not interested in this at all. And so the books follow his journey, and his relationship with these geese. And then, other creatures that end up living in his home. His latest book, the latest Bruce book is Bruce's Big Storm, which I think or is that Mother Bruce? I can't remember what I brought. But anyway, Ryan T. Higgins, he writes these Bruce books, but he also wrote this hilarious book called We Don't Eat Our Classmates, which is based on a Penelope Rex who goes to kindergarten for the first time and discovers all of her classmates are children, and she just can't help herself because they're so delicious. There's a lot of spitting children out and a lot of, oh, Penelope ate Ryan again. It's funny and silly. Life on Mars, also by John Agee. His books are kind of fantastical. That's his latest that's out. A kid goes to Mars looking for aliens and never does end up finding the one that was right there in front of his face. Jory John has also written these books. He wrote The Bad Seed and The Good Egg, but he's also got a book called Penguin Problems, which is okay, but this Giraffe Problems is hilarious. It's, this is where two characters are speaking to each other and learning, what might seem like something that, this giraffe just hates his neck. It's too long and gangly and all of this. And but the other character in the book really sees that as a great asset. And, because he can see and reach the bananas on the tree that this turtle has been waiting to get, for a week, waiting for them to drop. So, you never know what might seem like a disadvantage is actually an advantage. And it's told in a very funny way. Shake the Tree is a great book where, different animals keep falling out of the tree and you keep wondering, who's going to get eaten and who ends up, with the acorn in the end. It's got a nice surprise. It's one of these books that's got a surprise at the end. Shake the Tree. Other books that I love that have surprises at the end are like Bark George and Wolf's Coming. These are awfully fun for kids. Those two are not new, but Shake the Tree is the newest in that genre, in that flavor. How to Walk a Dump Truck. Like I said, trucks are always popular, and you really wanted a dog, but you got a truck instead. What do? Learn how to walk your dump truck. And the Itchy book. This book is one. We'll talk a little bit about them in a minute, about these Elephant and Piggy-like books. Many authors are sort of franchising themselves, and so we'll talk about that in a minute. These are some of my favorite fun, quirky, humorous books. Popular topics like dinosaurs and construction. Jane Yallen has sort of the newest in her How Do Dinosaurs Learn to Whatever, or How Do Dinosaurs, go to say goodnight. The latest in this series is How Do Dinosaurs Learn to Read. It came out last year. It's super cute. Of course, Tyrannosaurus Rex versus Edna, and We Don't Eat Our Classmates. These are my favorite dinosaur books. And then most recent dinosaur book that we got was That's What Dinosaurs Do. And kind of like, well, you can't really expect a dinosaur not to roar. It's a dinosaur. You can't really expect a dinosaur not to, chase. It's a dinosaur. That's this kind of a book. And these books by the McMullins, I'm Tough, I'm Dirty, I Stink. I'm Stinky. The I'm Tough is the latest one in that series of books. And it's popular as well. And Todd Parr also has this car and trucks book. And the puppy truck book just came out as well, the same month that How to Walk a Dump Truck did. And it's similar in flavor, but not exactly. But it's fun and it's whimsical and not too many words. It can be shared, easily with a 2-year-old. And the latest coming out from popular authors and series and characters, Llama Llama. The latest Llama Llama book is Llama Llama Love to Reads. Now, Anna Dewdney passed away, unfortunately, so she is not writing new books. Those Llama Llama books are extremely popular and always a hit with kids this age, but they are continuing to produce some of her stories. And so this is Llama Llama Loves to Read, an Anna Dewdney book. There's a partner writing that. Jan Brett's The Snowy Nap. It is the latest in the Hedgie sort of series, and like I said, she'll have a new book called The Tale of a Tiger Slippers, which is a spin on an old folk tale, coming out. Actually, it came out September 19th, so it's out, but she'll be doing her tour. Pete the Cat. Oh my gosh, Pete the Cat. Now, interestingly, we had Eric Litwin at the library a couple of, it was not this past summer, the summer before. He wrote the first 4 Pete the Cat books, which are probably the most popular. Rockin' My White, my White Shoes, the 4 Groovy Buttons, Pete's Christmas. James Dean and Kimberly Dean have taken over the Pete the Cat series from there. So James Dean was the illustrator, and Eric Litwin wrote the story. They went their separate ways, and now Kimberly Dean writes the stories and James Dean continues to illustrate. But the latest one out is called Pete the Cat and the Perfect Pizza Party. They differ. I mean, there are Pete the Cat stories and kids love them. They differ from those original 4 books. Eric Litwin was super into, making sure kids felt like they could be included and be a part of the reading, and that's why there's all those songs and chants in those books, sort of very easy for them to predict what the words are, and so they can engage. They're super engaging books. So he is not written any more Pete the Cat books, but he does have 2 new series that go along in those in the same vein. One of them is called Groovy Joe, and he's a dog. Ice Cream and Dinosaurs is one of them, and the other one is, the name escapes me at the moment. But and then he's got another series called The Nuts, and that's about, a brother and a sister and their family. They're nuts in trees, and but they've all got like a song. So you can always go on to YouTube, look up the book with Eric Litwin, and see he sings with his guitar, and you can get the tune in your head and teach that to a kid, and it's something that's really engaging for them. So Bruce's Big Storm is the newest in the Bruce books, and of course Mo Willems has a new pigeon book. It came out in July. It's called The Pigeon Has to Go to School. It's another one of these I read, for kids getting ready to go to school this year. When we talking of Mo Willems, a lot of people read Elephant and Piggy books. Do anybody share Elephant and Piggy books with these kids? Yeah, and they love them. Elephant and Piggy are awesome. There haven't been any Elephant and Piggy books out lately. Like I said, a lot of authors are sort of franchising their style and bringing other authors sort of under their wing and into. So there are a lot of these sort of Elephant and Piggy-like books, which Harold and Hog, Pretend for Real is, and It's Shoe Time, and also the Itchy book. These are all sort of in the style of Mo Willems and those Elephant and Piggy books. So if those books are popular with the kids that you're reading with and they enjoy those, they'll probably enjoy these as well. He's not doing Elephant and Piggy right now. Now he's got this series called Unlimited Squirrels, which, I was like, oh my gosh, that's all you had to say, Unlimited Squirrels, I'm in. And they're pretty funny as well. So if you've read all of the Elephant and Piggy books, you've been through all of those, you can start with these. So just before I take some questions, I thought that I would let you know what some of my favorite resources for finding out what these new books are that are coming out. One of my favorites is Read Brightly, and they've got a wonderful blog and wonderful book lists. So readbrightly.com is the website. But if you're looking for preschool books about autumn or whatever, it's very likely that they've generated a list of their favorites as well on there, and I go to them quite a bit. Goodreads is a great source. I don't know if you're already on Goodreads for yourself as an adult, but if you go to Goodreads and if you go and search in their genres and search in picture books, then if you navigate that way, they always have great lists. What I love about, I get a lot of, I'm on the list for all of the publishers and all of that. I'm finding out what's coming out new and the sort of trade magazines, the American Library Association and all of this. They always have their picks of what are the best books of the year. The publishing world and the book world always has an agenda, which I don't necessarily disagree with all the time. However, I find that the books that they choose sometimes for those lists and for that fit into that agenda are not always the ones that kids respond to the most. So I always make sure that I check those lists and see what's won the awards. But then I also like to check things like Goodreads and Brightly, which is sort of more like the popular opinion. It's good to have a balance. So like I said, there are a lot of books that are important that get touted and get a lot of play, but they aren't always the ones that kids are going to connect with the best in a setting like what you're in or a setting like I'm in. So that's what I have to say about that. Reading Rockets is also a great resource at readingrockets.org, and I enjoy Read Aloud Revival. There is there's a free level of that, and then there is a level at which you can pay for extra information, but you can access their blog and a lot of things and podcasts and stuff like that if you like to listen to people talking about kids' books. Read Aloud Revival is one of my favorites to check in with as well, and that's how I stay on top of what I should be buying for the collection and what I should be reading to kids. So that is the end of my presentation. I think we do have time for questions. If anybody has questions, I'd be happy to answer them or not.
Expert is one of our very own volunteers. She'll be presenting on the topic of read aloud techniques. Margaret Rowe is a retired New York State educator. She served as a primary teacher and a reading specialist there. She has worn God knows how many hats for Read Aloud Delaware. She was one of those committee members who was really key in developing the idea of creating these kinds of trainings for our volunteers. She has been a volunteer reader at both Cozy Critters and Lord Baltimore Elementary School. She developed and has led and has trained others to lead our parent empowerment programs, where we go into our centers and talk to the parents and staff there about the importance of reading and communicating and all of those good things. She was also the interim Sussex County coordinator before I came on board, and God knows what I would have done if she hadn't been around those first few months of my tenure. Margaret is passionate about quality books, and she wrote, and I asked each of our presenters for a blurb, and her quote is, she wants to get quality books into the homes, the hands, and the hearts of children. And I thought that was really a great way to put it. So please welcome our next expert, Margaret Rowe.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. I am delighted that you're all interested in learning more and continuing to learn about how to read, what to read, and why it's important to read to children. This book is called The Little Mouse, the Red Ripe Strawberry, and the Big Hungry Bear. It's by Dawn and Audrey Wood, and it's illustrated by Mr. Wood. You can tell by looking that my copy is very, very old. Hello, little mouse. What are you doing? Oh, I see. Are you going to pick that red ripe strawberry? But little mouse, haven't you heard about the big hungry bear? Oh, how that bear loves red ripe strawberries. The big hungry bear can smell a red ripe strawberry a mile away. Especially one that has just been picked. Boom, 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 the bear will tromp through the forest on his big hungry feet and sniff, sniff, sniff. Find the strawberry. No matter where it is hidden or who is guarding it or how it is disguised. Quick! There's only one way in the whole wide world to save a red ripe strawberry from a big hungry bear. Cut it in two. Share half with me. And we'll both eat it all up yum. Now that's one red ripe strawberry the big hungry bear will never get. The end. We're going to come back to that several times as I talk to you today. The first thing I want to talk a little bit about, and I'll say a lot of the same things that Jennifer said. I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically to what you do and how you read with children for Read Aloud, because our experience is different. I didn't mean to say this, but I'll tell you just so you know, there are lots and lots of organizations that read to children. I mean, firefighters go in and read to classrooms. All kinds of people read to classrooms, a teacher. Read Aloud Delaware is unique in that you read one-on-one with children. And it is the only organization in the country where the volunteers consistently read one-on-one with children. I'm going to talk a little bit about what a difference that can make. There are all kinds of benefits to children being read aloud to. There are emotional benefits. It makes the children feel valued. It makes them feel important. And it helps to build the relationships. It satisfies a need for acceptance and a need for validation. In Read Aloud, children are choosing what you're reading to them, and that makes a huge difference in their lives. You can't imagine. There are educational benefits, which it is in no way your job to teach children to read, but I wanted you to know from an educational standpoint some of the benefits that those kiddos might be getting from you. Incredible oral language development. Children hearing those words, hearing you say them, listening to the cadence of your voice, benefits in oral language. It helps them have what educators call story sense. Story sense is the fact that in most books, adult, children's, any books, there are characters. There's inevitably a problem. Inevitably, the characters make the problem worse and eventually solve it. It's pretty much how things happen in the world of literature. It helps with their imagination. Kids look at a lot of visuals now. We all do. So when they hear something, they have to come up with a story. They have to come up with the pictures. Pictures in their minds. It helps them to be problem solvers. It helps them to understand that, oops, that's the same thing that happened to Curious George. And, most important to kindergarten teachers, it helps them learn to sit quietly for a few minutes and pay attention to someone. There are, of course, lifelong benefits to being read to. Children who are read to become lifelong readers. They become problem solvers. It makes it easier for them to be part of a team because they, in some primitive way, know that it takes a team to solve that problem and a team to cooperate and work and play together. It helps them to be good citizens. And basically, we are just better as a literate society. We are better if everybody can read. We will be better. I'm going to talk a little bit about your experience, and I'm going to start with what to read. So the setting is different in wherever you volunteer and wherever you read. When I read at Cozy Critters, I read in a classroom behind a child-sized couch in a beanbag chair. It wasn't that pretty. Getting down, getting up, but I was behind the couch. And it was okay. The children don't care, of course. So you want wherever you are to be comfortable. Comfortable for you and comfortable for the child. It's not always easy, I understand that. It's important that you are within the classroom, not in a hallway, not in an office, certainly not someplace where there are no other people. But it's important that you're within the classroom, and it's important that you try to be what we call knee to knee. When you're reading one-on-one with a child, like you're reading to your children or your grandchild, the child needs to be next to you. The child doesn't need to be across from you where you're turning the book. When you read to a whole class, of course, the children are on the floor and you're reading the book. But if you can, whether you're in a small chair, whether you're on the floor, whether you're at a table in the classroom, if you can be and think of those words knee to knee, that helps. That helps the child to be part of the book, be part of the story. We let the children choose what they're going to hear that day, don't we? And that brings joy and it brings difficulty. So if you can, I personally never brought more than 4 books. Because if you're 3 or 4 years old, 7 books is an insurmountable number to choose from. So 3 or 4, and if you can't possibly read Pete the Cat and His Groovy Buttons one more time, don't bring it. Just don't take it. Don't take it into the classroom. If you can't possibly. If you can't possibly. So if there's a way, take a minute. It counts as your volunteer time. If I chose these 4 books to take into a classroom, I would take a minute as I took them out, and I know it's different. The setting is different every place. Where I read, the books are in a separate location, and I choose my books because there are more than one reader at a time there. And I go into a classroom. So I would just look at this. Obviously, it's a children's book. Obviously, the title is Counting in the Garden. But I need to know exactly what happens so that I can talk a little bit about each book with the children before they choose. Give them a little bit so they want to hear it. Always, always, always take a favorite, something they always want to hear. Always take a favorite and try to always bring one that they've never read, or never heard, and that you've never read. So you can talk a little bit about each one. Oh, this book is about counting. Now when we read this, you're going to have to be detectives because the animals, if I remember right, are hidden in the garden. So that's a hook. That's a hook. Someone might be interested in that. Oh, do you remember the one time we read Silly Sally? Do you know what it means to be silly? Have you ever been silly? Well, Sally is so silly, and she's silly on every single page. Oh, you know this one. Chicka, chicka, boom, boom. It's that book about all the numbers that go up in the tree. It's not about numbers, Miss Margaret. It's about the alphabet. They wouldn't say that. It's about ABCs. So, once again, I've said something so they remember the book and they might know it. Oh, Jonathan, I brought this book today. It only has a few words, but I think you're going to love it. The title of the book is I Am Small. Are penguins small? There's a penguin on the cover. Oh, it's about every reason that it's important for the penguin to be small. So I gave them all a little bit, and I know it's tedious. It seems like that took a long time. You don't have to give them as much as I give, but at least then they are making a choice, based on information that you gave them about the books. So then they're making a choice. They're validated, they know their opinion's important, and they know that you cared to bring books that you like. It's always important, or it's always okay, it's always important to tell them the title, and it's okay to tell them the author's name. It's okay to tell them the author's name and the illustrator and talk briefly about that. Children are expected to know that at a very young age in school. The books have to be appropriate for your age group. And I know some of you read to really little ones, some of you read to 4 and 5-year-olds, some of you read to 2 and 3-year-olds. So this book is a board book, which means that you think it's a book for a baby, because babies chew on books, and that's what board books are for. It has a lot of text, a lot of print, and it's not such a, this is opinion, not fact, not such a good story to read to a baby, because there's too much going on, too much going on. So yeah, it's a board book, but it's a lot for a 2-year-old. And I don't know if anybody's ever had this experience. If you bring a dinosaur book that's a board book into a 4-year-old boy, he is not the least bit interested in hearing it. It could be great text, it could be a great story, but because it's a board book, couldn't be less interested. Never going to pick it. So know what you're dealing with, know what the books are, what kind of books they are. So this book is a classic. There are books that are classics, and anybody will hear them anytime. If you're reading to 4 and 5-year-olds, I find that Jennifer talked a little bit about a series. She didn't talk about Froggy, but is anybody familiar with the Froggy series? Oh my goodness. Love, love, love Froggy. And Froggy's a character who obviously gets in a little trouble, and he always gets embarrassed at some point in every book, which is a wonderful thing to talk with 4 and 5-year-olds about. Froggy gets more red in the face than green, and Jonathan London, who's the author, uses that in all of his books. So those are good for 4 and 5-year-olds and those kinds of things. They also have to be subject appropriate. And Jennifer talked a little bit about that. It's not your job, it's not your place to introduce difficult topics to young children. You're just supposed to be experiencing, enjoying your time with them. So, you know, if books are, I don't even think I brought any, that have difficult topics, steer away from them. They shouldn't be in the library, but you might come across one. You might come across one. The other thing is, I would say to you that I have come across some pretty religious books in the library sometimes that get put in the bag, and that's not what we're there for either. So subject appropriate. If you're reading to little ones, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, books that are simple. This is a counting book, and it's about dogs. 2 winners. They can count the dogs. Anything by Sandra Boynton is good, is worth it. They are usually board books, but they have great stories. The Going to Bed book is a classic of hers. So those are kind of books. Books about colors. This is Cat's Colors. It's not my favorite illustrator, but it's about colors. Is it green? Green is the grass where I like to walk. So the tiger's every place where there's colors. So those are good to throw in there, or at least to offer to them. Also, Jennifer mentioned construction. This is a great book. It's Dig, Dig, Digging. And this is one of those books where you can read as much or as little of it as you like. Chances are pretty good that the children you're reading to aren't reading along with you, they're listening. So this one says, Diggers, Diggers are good at digging, scooping up the earth and lifting and tipping. They make huge holes with their digging. They can work all day. So the book goes like that all the way through. Diggers, fire engines, they race, swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Great language in this book. But if a young child picks this, and you know darn well, because you read to these kids every week, they can't make it through this, then the book sounds like this. Diggers, they can work all day. Fire engines, they can work all day. Tractors, oh, they can work all day. You're missing some of the language, but you might be holding on to the kid. So those are good tricks to you. Don't be afraid to editorialize what you're reading. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you read, and I'm going to use the Big Hungry Bear to do that. So it's important that you just give it all you've got. There's nobody videotaping you. and the children already think you're absolutely wonderful. They know you are, and they know you've come to read to them, and nothing makes them happier. So give it all you've got. This book, I chose it today, and I asked Stacy to get you each of a copy, which she generously did. And because it does all things. It does all things, and you can do all things with it. You can be enthusiastic. You can use voices without being really crazy. There's some sound effects. So, and the illustrations are amazing. You could walk through it without even talking about it, and a child would have an idea about the story. So, hello, little mouse. What are you doing? What does the mouse have? Oh my goodness, do mice have ladders? What's happening? Oh, I see. Are you going to pick that red ripe strawberry? That's what the ladder was for. So as you ask and answer questions while you're reading, just for the record, that's called dialogic reading. You're encouraging the child to think more about what you're reading and to think of questions that they might have about what's happening. Now, I'm saying a few words. Kids are looking at these illustrations, at the ladder. They're hearing my words, but they're seeing what's happening while hearing my words. Here's another question. Haven't you heard about the Big Hungry Bear? Oh my goodness, what kind of face does the mouse have? Is he happy about the bear? So they might say that the mouse is surprised. They might say he's afraid. And then you let them know how much the bear loves the red ripe strawberries, and how does the mouse look now? And they always, every time, and this book came out in 1984, every time, they want to know why his tail looks like that. Every time. So as the child is hearing this story, not so much here, boom, boom, boom. The author has put these words in uppercase letters. He wants you to say boom, 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 not boom, boom, boom. Because the bear is going to tromp. Oh my goodness, what a great word. Tromp. It's a word a child needs to hear so that they can use it again another day, or they can tromp back and get the next kiddo for you. Through the forest on his big hungry feet. Hungry feet? Are your feet hungry? So there's so much room in this story for conversation, for vocabulary development. Guarding it. Guarding is another one of those words like tromp. It's not a word that a 3 or 4-year-old hears every day. And so you can talk about the illustration and what it means to guard something. And of course this one, disguised. To talk about what that means. That increase in oral language helps their brain it helps them to be ready for school. I have read this book thousands of times, and no one, not one time, not a whole classroom, not my own children, not individual children, have ever asked where the bear is. I have never, ever, not one time, ever had a child ask to see the bear, which is a huge testament to this author and how they describe what's happening with the language and the illustrations. Because I'm not exaggerating, I have never had anybody ask where the bear is. So you can do those things with a book. While you're reading, ask and answer questions. It helps kids gain vocabulary. It helps them understand and gain comprehension. And it helps them develop something called schema, which is background information. When they go to kindergarten, and a kindergarten teacher reads the book Jamberry, where the bear picks the fruit, someplace in that little mind is a connection to the bear who didn't get the fruit because the mouse shared it. So it helps them build background knowledge when they hear other stories. I know that your time is limited with each child, and I understand that I don't know how many books you each read. I used to read 2, maybe 3 to each child, but you could read one book and read it really well for 10 or 12 or 15 minutes and do a lot with it, or you can read 2 or 3 books. It makes absolutely no difference. But if you chose to do it this way, you could have the child retell you what's happening, turn the page, always give them that visual, give them that illustration, and ask them to tell you what happened on that page. So they're doing all the talking, and you're only turning the pages. Another way to develop language and comprehension is to have a couple of titles on the same topic. So you would say, remember what happened in this book. I'm going to read you another book. Oh, I hope you'll pick this one. It's about a bear who eats too many berries. So then, a couple of books, same topic, different things happen, but some similarities. That's another good way to help them develop their comprehension. And this is very difficult, but you all know it's very important, and that is to read the same book over and over again. It is very important. It helps the child to internalize what you're reading, to be very familiar with that language, and to use that vocabulary and use those words over and over again in their life. My grandson, when he was 4, he chose a book from my house. The title of the book is Willie and Hugh. It's an out-of-print book, but Willie is a monkey, Hugh is a ape. Anyway, they are unlikely friends and become friends. And there's a line at the beginning of the book where it says, Willie was lonely. Everybody thought he was useless. Useless is not a 4-year-old word, nor is it not a concept that 4-year-olds understand. But in the illustration, everyone's playing and Willie's standing by himself. Mason started using the word useless wrong many times, and then it became a part of his vocabulary, and I thought to myself, I wish I could video this over time, because it's exactly what I talk about all the time, is that when exposed to complex vocabulary, children use it, which is what we want them to do, to understand. Another thing that's important is to insert definitions. If a child didn't know what disguised meant, you point out that there's a mask and, disguise, and try to think of another example that a kiddo might know that means disguise. So that's important too. I need you to know that listening comprehension is so much higher than what a child can read or understand. Don't ever be afraid to read something that might be a little difficult, because think about yourself. You can hear something and understand it, on the radio, on TV, or not on TV, that's a bad example, but if you tried to read it yourself, you would be like, what the heck? What is it? What's going on? But when you hear someone's voice, their cadence, their inflection, when they stop, when they take a breath, when they read like something is important, it helps you to understand it. So it's a wonderful thing for children to sit and look at books. A wonderful thing. But for you to share your voice and your heart and let them know which is the important part, which is the scary part, which is the fun part, which is the silly part, it does so much more for them. It's really, really important. I wanted to talk a little bit about, some people read to 4 and 5-year-olds, and it's a time when kiddos are switching from loving a story to, well, for example, like, okay, so they might want to hear all the Froggy books that you have. They might want to read more of these. These books are lovely. They're wonderful. Jonathan London is a fabulous author. They're a lot to read, 2 of them in your little knee-to-knee sittings. They're a lot. But kids start to like that. They also start to like informational text, which used to be called nonfiction. If that helps. Informational text, this is another example of a book that might be in the crate, and you might take it because you might have kiddos who love to collect shells, or obviously we live in a place where kiddos go to the beach. But it's also a book where you couldn't possibly read the whole book to a child, but you can find something, they can pick a page, and you can talk about those things on the page. It's important as their brains are starting to switch from, bears in funny hats to serious knowledge, which is, 4, 4.5, 5. It's good to have a couple of those if those are the kind of, if those are the kiddos you read with. Littler ones, it's good if the text is predictable. Where did I am small go? Oh, here it is. So little ones, and this is a small book, but that's not why I'm sharing it with you. This is a book that a little boy named Samuel gave me when I was teaching. It says inside. But reading this to a younger child, the world is big, and I am small. The world is vast, and I am small. The ocean is deep, and I am small. You see what's happening here. The mountains are steep, and I am small. The wind is strong, and I am small. The winter is long, and I am small. The sky is high, and I am small. This is, of course, a page where you have to look for him, and he's way down here. The stars stretch far, and I am small. These things are big and long and deep and strong and high and fast and steep. And I am small, but you are big and you are kind, and I'm with you, I do not mind. I may be small, but I can see. The biggest thing to you is me. That's a lovely book, and it's a wonderful book for dads, because male penguins take care of baby penguins, and so it's a good book to expose that to. Or it's a good book for Father's Day for your sons who have children. Shopping advice is free. So predictable texts, they're so good for phoneme development. As that child heard me say, I am small, obviously soon they're saying I am small. They're saying those words, they're hearing those words, they're developing that vocabulary. The phoneme development, which is the way that you make sounds in your mouth and the sounds that you hear, is so important. The other thing that's important for the little ones is rhyming books. books that rhyme. I spend a lot of time in a kindergarten classroom at Lord Baltimore, and the inability of 5-year-olds to rhyme is phenomenal. It's unbelievable. And it's a different skill to be able to say cat, bat, hat. Do they rhyme? Yes. Then for me to say fish, can you tell me a word that rhymes with fish? It's a much higher level skill, incredibly difficult for them to do. It's important that we say so they can hear rhymes all the time. Mrs. McNosh, this is a silly book. It's a rhyming book. They love this book. It's not too long. Each Monday at dawn, Miss Nellie McNosh brings out a barrel and does a big wash. It takes her all morning, and when the sun's high, she hangs out what she's washed to dry. She hangs up the dresses, the shirts, the underwear, you can imagine, nightgowns and skirts. She hangs up the stockings, and this is when it gets crazy. She hangs up the shoes, she wings out the paper, she hangs up the news. She hangs up the dog and his dish and his bowl. She gets a wrong number and hangs up the phone. That would be another whole lesson on, do you know what this is? This is a phone, it has a door. I mean, you could do 10 minutes on that. She hangs up a hat and an old wedding gown and 2 sleepy bats, which she hangs upside down. So it's silly, but those rhyming words go all the way through it. Eventually, in the end, she takes off her apron and lets down her hair. Then she hangs herself up in a comfortable chair. So this is a good one for 3 and 4-year-olds for rhyming and those kinds of things. When the story is over, talk about it. Try not to just go on to the next one. It's okay to say, what do you think? Obviously, we always say, did you like that? And they say yes, but that's a closed-ended question. Did you like that? Did they say yes? It's better to say things like, were you surprised that the mouse had all those ways to hide the strawberry? What would you have done if you had to hide a strawberry? So ask questions that have longer answers than yes or no, those kinds of things. It's also okay to absolutely just think aloud while you're reading. Just, oh, he already buried it, and he already locked it up. I wonder what he'll do next before you turn the page. So you're thinking out loud, and it helps them to think as stories are read to them. Obviously, ask them what do they think, what would have happened if the bear got the strawberry, what if something different happened. You are doing an absolutely wonderful thing. I know that the benefit goes both ways, that it's wonderful for children, but it's fun to do as well. And Stacy, close your ears. But sometimes, you know, when it was my turn to go to Cozy Critters, I would think, oh my God, I want to go to it. I want to get dressed. I want to go. I'm supposed to be there by 8:30. Oh my God. And then I was always a whole different person when I was walking out. Whether it was a good day, a bad day, or whatever, there I was in a classroom full of children, learning, children who are spending their whole day there. And it was wonderful. It was all good, all good. Do as much or as little of what I've said as makes you comfortable. It's never intended to make you uncomfortable. If it's too silly for you, you don't have to do that. If you can, sit side by side with the child because that makes them feel like you're reading to them, like you read to your grandchildren or your children. But do as much or as little as you like. What you do is very important, and we appreciate you. Thank you. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, concerns, books they'd like to see? Barbara?
Well,
I'm so glad you're in the front now.
my question is, like at the Head Start where I'm reading, I mean, a good portion of these kids really don't speak English and they don't understand, you know, and I don't know, you got any suggestions?
How old are they?
They're 3 and 4.
They're 3 and 4.
Yeah.
You need to rely on the illustrations.
Yeah.
as much as you can. It's important that you read to them, and that you read to them in English. It's also important, obviously, that they speak their language. So and this will help you to know how important it is for you to do that. Stacy mentioned that I do the parent empowerment workshops in the county, and these are workshops where, usually in the evening, I go into the child care centers, the children are there, they feed them a meal, and the parents are there to learn a little something. And so I talk to them about how important it is. And what I discovered when I did that was, so many of the children's, especially mothers, they can't read English, but nor can they read in their native language. They're illiterate in all languages. So they aren't reading to their children in another language or in English. So anything that you're doing is wonderful. And if you rely on the illustrations and things that they need to know, I can say that at Lord Baltimore, there's a large English as a second language population, and almost by this time, certainly by Thanksgiving, it's a level playing field. It's all good. When they're immersed in that, it's all good. Obviously, they have support as well, but yeah, so rely on the illustrations. Don't stop reading. Use pretty simple text, I think. Yeah, maybe not, the difficulty level. Yeah.
So just 2 comments. The first is thank you for suggesting this book. I walked in and just had an immediate emotional connection. I used to read this to my son
Oh my gosh.
when he was a baby, and he, at 9 months, whatever age,
Yeah.
anticipated that boom, 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 and would bounce up and down.
Oh my goodness.
Boom,
I got
boom, boom.
goosebumps.
He didn't really speak till he was 3. He's now 33, and he will become a father for the first time next week on
Oh my
Thursday.
goodness.
So I'm just having an emotional moment about that. And I think that's really the beauty of books and why we're sharing this love with children, because it can transcend a lifetime. It can transcend a couple of lifetimes. The second is I'm a retired preschool teacher. So about the thing about handling difficult topics with children, and I agree, like,
Yeah.
first transgender, whatever, that's true, but also certain things like death. For
Sure.
instance, I had a book in my classroom called Saying Goodbye to Lulu, and it was about the family dog dying, and everybody in the they talk about when the baby dog was a puppy, and then and the child's growing with the dog, and then the dog gets all gray and slows down and doesn't eat as much, and the dog dies, and every family member puts something in the box with the dog, a smelly sock to take the family with them, and they bury it under a tree and mourn the dog, and then eventually get a new puppy. But you just cannot read this book dry-eyed. But the thing that's important about giving a story like that to a child is, don't do it when the dog has died. Do it when they have a young puppy, so that when they know, when the dog does die,
Right.
they have a story, an idea about what you do when your very much loved pet dies. It's not
Right.
like something you're doing in a crisis situation, but you're giving them that experience.
background.
First I used to hide it, like,
Sure.
in the divorce and the,
Right. Right.
tragedy section, when the parents would come ask for something. But then I just started leaving it out, and then when I would hear the crying parent, I would know, oh my gosh, they found Saying Goodbye to Lulu. But it was good to see that adults felt with the story. So
That is good.
I don't
Good
know.
point.
I mean,
A good
we're
point.
just
It
with
is.
these children,
Sure.
but we are building a connection in
you
that
are.
moment, and we have no idea what's going on in their life
You're absolutely right.
and what questions they need answered.
Well, let me tell you about the connection and how important it is. I did a workshop, I guess a couple of weeks ago at Del Tech, and the class was a beginning literacy class, and at Del Tech, many learners are adult learners. You know, it wasn't a room full of 19-year-olds, it was adult learners. And some of them were young, of course. And so I started to talk, and I was talking about the organization, about Read Aloud. And I had my papers in this, and so I just went like this, and I said, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this. 4 people in the room had been read to, and like you, immediately said, oh my goodness, a lady used to come into my preschool. And I was like, wow. I mean, I'm pointing out that we give the children a sticker, and they were like, yeah, and like you, they were just beaming. They were just beaming, these 4 students. It was really very powerful. I'd forgotten about that till you said that about remembering the book. But anyway, anybody else? Thank you so much for coming, for reading.
Our last presentation of the day is going to be led by Andrea King. She was the reading specialist at the kindergarten center last year. Andrea has been in education for 32 years. She's been a classroom teacher, a reading specialist, and a literacy coach. She currently works for the Indian River School District as a reading specialist and their child find coordinator. So Andrea's going to talk to us about managing distractions and keeping students focused. So please help me welcome her today. Thanks for coming, Andrea.
I was very happy to be invited to work with you. I'm looking forward to my retirement where I can come back and just read stories to children. So I'm very much looking forward to that, hoping this is my last year actually. So I was happy to get involved with your organization. In the kindergarten center last year, we had quite a few readers. I'm not sure if any of you were with us at the kindergarten center. There you are. And you had some challenges. I know, because a lot of times the teachers have you read in the hallway. And there are many challenges that come with that. Then you have the distracted little children because of their age, their size, what's happening in the hallway. So what I'd like to start with today, and you're going to have to move a little bit, is I gave you all a Post-it note. If I didn't, let me know, and we can pass them out. So somewhere on the table, I laid a Post-it note. If you could jot down some behaviors that you would like me to address, that would help. So what were some actions or behaviors, or even where you were placed to read, that caused problems or distractions? Just jot down some things that were distracting for the children, or some behaviors that the children do that keep you from being able to read the stories. And then if you wouldn't mind walking up and putting them on my poster board up there, that will give me a little focus on how to talk to you today. So take a few minutes, jot down some behaviors that the children had, or some problems with the building or the situations that you were put in that caused distractions. I did write down, I guessed, some of the things you might say when I was planning for this. There are some where children are touching parts that we don't want them to touch. Made me laugh right away. The wiggles, I definitely considered the wiggles. Classroom movement, hallway movement, things like that. How about kicking their legs while you're reading? Constantly kicking. Kicking you, kicking the table, kicking the chairs. I'm sure those are some things. Hopefully I'm going to give you some strategies today that can help with these. Grabbing books, you choose one book, but then they're grabbing other books because all of a sudden they don't want to read the one that they chose or whatever. Talking during the story or being distracted by the other kids that are listening to stories. I think those are some problems you've had. Interrupting. I'm not too sure I saw that actual word. But interrupting you while you're reading, probably. Stopping what you're reading to ask you other questions that are unrelated. Have you encountered that before? And then there's the comprehension. They're just not understanding. the story, or you think they're not understanding the story, or they're not paying attention to the story, they're not getting it, probably is a problem. But I see activity repeated, I see wiggling, a lot of movement from the other people in the hallway. So the things that you've heard from the other two speakers today, that's exactly where you want to start. It's hard to pull out just managing distracted behaviors without also telling you to use all the strategies that you've already heard. So planning your reading, going in with a focus for your plan, that's going to help stop a lot of these behaviors. Especially once you get to know your students. When you know that every time I read to Becky or John or whatever, they're going to do this, come in with a plan for how you might counteract that. And we can talk about a little strategies to do with that. But what I was hearing previously from the previous session, have a focus, have a plan, know what kind of story you're going to read, use your voice, how you use your voice, your inflection, all of that. That's the first place to start in managing the distracted behaviors. So that's why teachers make a plan. You come in, you know this is going to happen, so you're going to plan for it. You might have to plan with reading a story about rules. You're going to have to establish some rules for when they come in, and maybe it's the first week that you're reading to them. Maybe the first week you're just introducing yourself and you're getting to know them. But there's going to come a time that you have to actually establish, when we're sitting together and I'm reading to you, these are some things we need to do. And you're going to talk about how your hands are in your lap, your feet are on the floor, you're looking at the reader, you're looking at the pictures. There are some books that you could check out that might be in your goodie bag of books, or you could request them to be in there about rules. There's many, many different books about rules. There is a cute little series, the Howard B. Wigglebottom series. He's kind of a problem child. He has many different books about him. But this one is Howard B. Wigglebottom Learns to Listen. It's a little bit too old for your 3-year-olds. Maybe your 4-year-olds would be okay. But your kindergartners and first graders, they might do well with a book like this. There are younger books about rules that you could choose to read. When you're ready to establish listening rules with the children, you might want to choose a little book. I won't read it all to you, but you would want to do a pre-read, which I'm sure you've heard about in your other sessions. You want to maybe go through the pictures, talk about the pictures, talk about what's happening in the story. This is about a little rabbit who has trouble listening, not just in school, but at home and on the playground. And Howard just doesn't listen. So you go through the story, but you're going to do a little walk. Look, all the other children or the other animals are listening to the teacher. Howard is way over here. Where should Howard be? This is all before you even read the story. Oh, the teacher looks like she's not happy. What's Howard doing? He's not where he should be. So you're going to talk about the different things that Howard is going through. What happened to Howard here? Look, he's in the cafeteria. He's not listening. The kids are saying, watch out. He falls on the banana, drops his food everywhere. So you do a picture walk. You talk about the different situations where listening, if you were a good listener, these things wouldn't happen. At the end of the story, you can tell Howard is listening. And this little series comes with an online link where you can get coloring sheets that go with the series, or in this case, you can get a list of rules that come with the book. Sit quietly, listen to the teacher, focus, and it goes through a list of rules. But you could start with reading a book about rules and how important it is to be a good listener. Or you could just establish your rules. What do you expect to see? What does good listening look like? What does good listening sound like? You could establish that with the children without reading a story. Again, you want to do like a picture walk, which I know you've heard about in your other sessions. Some students like to interrupt with lots of questions. If you know that they have lots of questions, if you know you're going to work with this child and he's always interrupting you with questions, you could give him little post-it notes. Instead of interrupting me with your question, put this little post-it note in the book, and we'll come back and talk about it after we read the story. Maybe give them 3. So I know you're going to have questions when we read this book today. So here are some post-it notes, or here are some bookmarks. When you have a question, stick it in the book, and we'll go back and talk about your question at the end. It's one strategy you could use. You could actually write down the question. So the child interrupts you, that's a good question. Let's write it down, keep going. Read the story, then go back and talk about their questions. If you do a preview or a book walk or a pre-reading, a lot of times the questions will be done before you actually start reading. So think about doing some kind of a quick pre-read. What kinds of questions do you have now based on the pictures? And now I'm going to read the story. This time I need you to listen quietly so we can read the whole story, and then we'll go back and talk about more of your questions. So you could give them some strategies, some goals, some ways to organize themselves. You could also give them a focus for listening. So I'm going to read you a story about a rabbit who gets in trouble at school. Howard is going to have lots of problems. Let's listen for 3 things Howard does that he shouldn't do in school or at home. So you want them to focus on 3 things. So as you're reading, you can stop and say, what was the first thing Howard did? So you can stop and ask questions. If you know you're going to be interrupted anyway, go ahead and stop and ask the question. And then let's listen for the second thing that Howard does. And you read and you stop. Okay, now what's another problem Howard has? And then you read for the third thing. So if you already know you're going to be interrupted, plan for that. Plan for the stopping points along the way, and then you can address their issue because they want to talk about the story. So you could give them a task. Listen for the 3 characters in the story, or listen for the problem the character is going to have. This character, he's just going to have a problem. Let's listen to find out what the problem is. And then when you come to the problem, you can stop and say, do you think this is the problem this character is having? So again, you're planning with the thought that you're going to be interrupted anyway. So go ahead and plan for that and have some questions ready. If it's a nonfiction book, you can talk about, I'm going to read a book about, I heard you had quite a few nonfiction books up here. I have one about trucks, for example. Going to read a book all about trucks. Can you tell me 3 different types of trucks when we're done? So give them a reason to focus on your reading. And when you're done, see if, oh, you know what? You've named all 3 of them. Here's your sticker. Well, you got 2. Let's see if we can go back and find a third one. Here's your sticker, because I know you give stickers at the end. So give them a focus for why they're listening to the story. That sometimes helps them focus better. Again, so you're going to know by the time you know your children, you've already established the rules. You know that these 3 children are going to interrupt you every time. So just go in with a plan for how you're going to address their interruptions. And I do have some other strategies that are for the behaviors like the constant wiggling, the hallway noise. I did notice in previous schools when the readers are out there, a lot of times the teacher will have chairs out for you, or you'll grab chairs and you'll put them out and you'll face them into the traffic so that all you can do is see everything that's going around. So just turn them around. It's not natural. It feels very strange, but you're going to face the wall instead of the traffic. And you're going to make your own little bubble. So you'll be together, you'll have the chair next to you, and their wall will be here. So you're now in a learning bubble. You can talk to the children about this is why we turn our chairs around. We turn them so we can be in this quiet little bubble, so we can just focus on the story and have fun reading together. So talk to them about why you're doing it. Talk to them about their behavior. If you've established rules and you've gone in with this reading plan in mind and you still have some children that can't listen or grabbing or kicking or whatever, talk to them about what you expect at that point. So we know what a good reader or a good listener does. A good listener waits their turn, they listen to the reader. You've already established that. But now you have this one or two children that you have to just say, I noticed you're kicking a lot when we're in here. What can we do to stop kicking? Or when I'm reading, sometimes you're pulling at the book. What can we do to help you not do that? And so this is where you can get into some strategies, behavior management strategies. One of them is to give them something to play with. Now, I did not anticipate everybody being here, so I didn't bring enough for you to have, but you're welcome to have it. A great thing to give them that they can't really choke on because it's big is a pipe cleaner. So as they're listening to the story, they're allowed to twirl it. They're allowed to play with it. They might not be looking at your picture. A lot of our children can't focus on an actual print all the time, but they can hear you and they can hear, I heard her talking about voice and inflection. They can hear the story through you, even though they might not be looking at the picture. They might be fidgeting with something, but they're still hearing your story and they're still hearing your excitement. It's not just pipe cleaners. You can use those craft pom-pom balls, the pom-poms that you make crafts with. They can play with those. See, look. Squishy toys. Not balls, maybe not because they drop and roll. But there's squishy stars. There's squishy, all kinds of squishy toys. Things that won't really roll away that you have to chase. Play-Doh, I don't know if you want to get into that, but sometimes Play-Doh is really good, but then you're touching the book, so be careful with what you're choosing. But giving them a fidget toy gives them a focus for their movement. Then you should see a reduction in not as much wiggling, maybe not as much kicking, because they're actually engaged physically as well as mentally with the story. So those are some strategies. You can also, going too fast through my presentation, but you can have signal cards. Sometimes students need an actual signal. So when the green sign is up, that's when we can talk together. That's when you and I can have a conversation about the story or about the pictures or something about this. But when the red sign is up, that's when you're listening. That's when you're listening to the story and you're following along. When I turn the green sign up, again, you can have conversations. You can talk about the book, but the red sign is for listening. So you might have to train them how to do that, what your signals are. Doesn't even have to be this fancy. It could be an index card. It can just be some kind of a signal card. Some index cards are colored on two sides. You can color something, but you have your stop and go. Little children, I know some of you are going to be, if you're at my center, quite a few people are assigned to the Early Learning Center in Frankfurt. I don't know if you're here today, but we have quite a few readers that are going to start soon. Those children some are not quite 3. They're 3 and they're 4. Many of them have behavior or learning difficulties. So they would benefit from having these fidget toys. Or even for the younger students, you wouldn't want to give a 2-year-old maybe a pipe cleaner. But if they have a stuffed animal from the classroom, if you have your own favorite that you want to bring in a wash when you're done, you could have them grab a stuffed animal. Sometimes just holding a stuffed animal while you're reading to them can give them a focus. So having a stuffy, having something in their hands to occupy them, again, using your bubbles, not facing the traffic. those are some strategies you could use. Even other students, they're still going to struggle with following through in the whole time. So you might want to think about some kind of a chart. So I know that they earn a sticker at the end. If you earned a sticker today, you also get to color in the chart. Or you could do one that's coloring, and you can just use the pen you have, whatever you have with you. Today, so I read to you today, you get to color that one in. When you get to 3, I'm going to have you pick your own book, or if you want, I know you're volunteers, but sometimes people bring in rewards anyway, or a different sticker or something like that. You could offer some kind of reward, but it helps them manage their behavior a little bit. And so the next week when you meet, oh look, last week you got to color in one of the sons. Let's see if you can color one in today, because last week you were such a good listener. Let's see if you can be a good listener today too. Obviously they wouldn't have to get to 12 the first time. And sometimes it's just a matter of coloring it. That's fun too. That you earned it, you're doing a good job, you show it to them each week, and they know that they're doing what you expect them to do. I was asked to talk a little bit about English language learners. Their behaviors sometimes are because they don't understand. Sometimes they're brand new. I know at our center we have students, one just came from China, and one was right from Russia. So they don't have the English yet. They're probably not going to be a wiggly behavior problem, but they might be attention because they have no idea what you're talking about. So I heard you mentioning earlier concept books. So pick books that are about nonfiction mostly. You're going to pick a concept. So I'm going to read about animals today, and then you talk about the vocabulary. So I'm not going to repeat the strategies you heard earlier about how to develop vocabulary, but that's what you would want to do. You would want to pick some books where you can just talk about specific words. In this book, it's actually about words like soft. This is the rabbit. The rabbit is soft, soft. So you're just going to try to establish that. Elephant, his ears are rough, rough. So different concepts. Again, I brought my truck book. The boys seem to like, even the girls, they like nonfiction books too. And I heard that transition between ages 4 and 5, that's a big one. Our 4-year-olds really like the books about concepts and colors, things like that. Wild animals. I just grabbed my own children's old books. The colors, you could do colors, and then you can go back and point to the one that's brown, which one is yellow. You're just trying to develop that language. So I heard some good strategies. Repetitive books are good. You can have them repeat. Mr. Brown can moo, can you? A lot of you probably have had this memorized. You've probably read it, so you can see how bent this one is. But it's repetitive, and then you have them repeat some phrases with you. So repetition is good for even keeping their behavior. That gets them involved with the book, that keeps them engaged. As long as they're engaged, you usually won't have any particular issues, except for the students that are have that issue to start with. And you will learn your children, and you'll learn what strategies you need to come with to prepare. A lot of times you already know the books that are in your bag because you've read them to so many different children. So maybe make a plan for when you come in. I know that this one's going to be interrupting me, so this is the plan that I'm going to come up with. I do have a handout with some of these strategies in it, and again, I was talking very fast. I'm sorry. Do you have any questions or anything I didn't cover? Oh, as far as the personal parts, kids tend to do that when they're 2 and 3. You're going to expect that. Maybe have a little more distance between yourself when you have students that are a little bit too touchy-feely. Talk about how you keep your hands in your lap and how good touch, you don't touch like that in school and things like that. I think I addressed most of your concerns, but please ask questions. I probably couldn't think of everything. Yes, I do have a handout.
Do you have any suggestions about dealing with a child who will, and setting the parameters up front, I think will help, but who will, I put the books out and let them choose which one. And there's one who goes, he'll be halfway through it and he'll want to put it down and get another one.
Yeah, so knowing that child, that's going to happen, I would have the other books put away. So you pick the two. He picks it, you put it away. And then it's out of sight. This is the book we're going to read today. Let's get through this book first. And then if we have time, we can look at the other book. But then he's only got one to look at. And there should be no distraction. That might be another one that you have to give a fidget toy to, or a chart. You know, let's talk about how we behave. We don't grab, we listen, and if you can do that, we'll color in your chart. And then if we have time, we'll read the next story. But get it out of sight. Any other questions? Yes?
The pre-K in your school, should it be any different from any pre-Ks we've done in the past, where it was an individual school, or there are new groupings, or?
We just have a lot more kids than we have in the past. So I'm new there this year. I think we went from 4 classrooms to, I don't know, I think we have 8. And then we have mornings and afternoons, and it's a lot more students. So I know that they tried to set up a center. It's a quieter room instead of in the hallway. But with some of the younger ones, by the time you got there and got back, you might not be able to read very many books. But yeah, some of the older children that are close to that area might be able to go in there. So that will help, because it's a closed off little room for you. Good question. And I give you a lot of credit for coming in to read, and you're in all kinds of situations. I have been one of those people interrupting you as I'm walking through the hall with my groups, and I apologize for that. I feel bad every time. But I give you a lot of credit for volunteering for us, and our children love it. They talk about it all the time. So keep it up. Thank you. We'll hand out the handouts.
Okay. Thank you. Do half, or do you need to talk to them? I can do
Yeah, I'm
this.
just going to do a quick closing, so you can leave me half and we'll pass them out. Just in closing, I want to thank all of you again for coming and participating today. Please remember to finish completing your evaluation form. On the way out, when you turn in your evaluation form, I'd like to present you all with a copy, if you don't have it already, of Mem Fox's book called Reading Magic. When I was hired as the county coordinator, I was really inspired by this book. And its message about how reading aloud to children really has such an impact on their own ability to learn to read, and really on their entire lives, because reading affects children in so many ways. So as you exit, drop off your evaluations at the back table, and please feel free to pick up another book to take home. And hopefully this book will keep you feeling valued and inspired about the important work you're doing with the kids here in Sussex County. So thank you all for all you do, and enjoy. Thanks for coming today.